Hello and welcome to Marxism Abridged, where we try to make orthodox Marxism easier to understand. Almost 2 centuries ago, Karl Marx stated that under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated, by force if necessary. The arming of the proletariat is paramount to revolution, for without that, there would only be mass slaughter, something Marx and revolutionaries of the time had seen happen again and again as the forces of reaction mowed down the nascent revolutionary uprisings. We are no longer in an era, if we ever were, where the voices of the people matter more than the barrel of a rifle. Socialism will not be brought about with mere words. This has been tried and has failed many times. We must be prepared to actually commit to a revolution as opposed to simply talking about it. The communists have been targeted again and again, whether for legitimate reasons or not, by the reactionary elements which control our world. The bourgeois dominated states and their dogs have picked up an old trick. That is to paint the communists as some menacing, violent agent of chaos, when this couldn't be further from the truth. The communist left, while opposed to the current order of things, is weak, comfortable in their armchairs, ready for a revolution to be fought by anyone besides themselves. They are content with speaking a theory amongst themselves instead of actively moving towards the revolutionary process, and this cannot be the case. We must move to arm ourselves in order to better defend ourselves from the forces of reaction, as there's only one path being laid out by the reactionary state, the path of extermination. We have seen this, too, with the current powers actively blaming the communist left, or just the left in general, an intentionally indefinite definition which encompasses any form of opposition, from all sorts of attacks on the reactionary apparatus. But the communist movement in America is too weak to be capable of perpetrating these. Instead, these false flags are meant to provide the conditions to finally crush us once and for all. There was once a time where communists would take to the streets to oppose fascism and liberalism in open combat, but these days have slipped past us like water through our hands. Gone are the days where the communist leagues and armed groups would defend the working class's rights and protect the proletariat from intimidation, attack, and decimation. Where once there were Black Panthers, Spartacists, and vanguards, there are now only theoreticians playing at defense. We were once proud enough in our theory to command the respect deserved to communism. What is left is only books and articles speaking of defense, but little else to actualize it. There is no more muscular arm of communism, and this is to the detriment of all the working class. At this time, the most armed ideology in the world is that of the reactionary. They hold weapons that, if pointed at us, would ultimately destroy us. We are at the whims of the liberal state and their fascist underlings, and this cannot stand. Decimation at the hands of the fascists and the social fascists is imminent, and we feel it to our core. But we act as though the impending revolution will save us as though it is a proverbial rapture, sent from above to protect us once enough of us have been martyred. I am, for one, tired of being afraid of the day that the reactionaries decide we are a legitimate enough target to take out en masse, which, with how much of the world is under their control, may be very soon. There were once massive movements meant to arm the proletariat. While many have been misguided in some ways, we can learn from them and their successes. The Black Panthers, for example, weren't only giving out free breakfasts. They would patrol the streets with long arms, ready to defend the working poor from state violence at a moment's notice. The communist leagues in America, too, were once armed and prepared for a revolution. But now they sit back while those poisoned with ideology gather enough arms to take out the entire real movement. We see the worst of it from the true communists, who would rather print newspapers and speak to one another in isolated bubbles as opposed to actually arming themselves and training for the revolution to come. There are, of course, those within the communist spaces that view violent struggle as a road too far. A sort of dogmatic pacifist that wishes for a better world and prays that others with similar beliefs but more violent inclinations take up arms in their stead. This is a liberal tendency, as their movement is to stagnate the movement of social causes by demanding all actions be within the realm of respectability. American liberalism has failed to protect its citizenry from any form of violence, whether it be random acts of gun violence or systemic violence enacted by the police. Perhaps it is better to say that the liberal system was never meant to prevent these acts of distributed mass violence directed at the working class, only to prevent similar violence from reaching the sanctified bourgeoisie. It is this tendency that has led us to the current movement, a left so disarmed that the mere idea of a revolution would spell nothing but our slaughter, a left so preoccupied with whether or not they have the mental fortitude for gun ownership, but still yearn desperately for a civil war. In turn, we have become nothing more than evangelical Christians, praying for the end times but doing nothing and providing nothing but derision. But this betrays the memory of countless revolutionaries who understood that true pacifism cannot be achieved by societies that only change in response to drastic action. Our current movement is paralyzed by the threat of being perceived as violent when the reactionary forces at play don't need a pretense to attack our efforts. While we bicker, they train. While we break our backs over the nuances of our revolution, the reactionary has already begun marching in the streets, and we must be ready to challenge them wherever they appear. This starts at home, of course. The first step to community defense is to be willing to be in a community with others, to understand their day to day struggles, hopes, and aspirations. Once you have a community, defending it feels like a second nature. Black Panthers once required that their members not only be well read in theory, but also have a personal arsenal, one that can be mobilized within a phone call. It is time we ask the same of our comrades in arms. We espouse mottos like arm the dolls, protect equality, and under no pretext, but rarely do we live by them or mean them in sincerity. Now is the time for that attitude to adjust. The anarchists, infantile as they may be, exemplify this attitude. They have, for lack of a better phrasing, begun to organize armed militias to defend their communities and their project. What sets us apart from them, besides theory, is a willingness to actualize. What they lack in organized theory, they make up for in action. They have set forth the goal to arm themselves to protect their worldview, and we must do the same. Our movement to abolish the current state of things must be willing to actually abolish the current state of things forcefully. Without this force, the best we can do is critique the system which aims to destroy us. This has been Marxism Abridged. Thank you for listening.